Charles.
Hey there, Jason. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you here. Welcome to Sunday. So we've got a little bit of a new arrangement here that hopefully makes things sound better.
Well, you know, I think that now that you've got the sound department working 24/7 to fix the problems,
Right.
It's not going to ever catch up with the art department, but that sound department.
You know, we've all got our strengths and weaknesses. Of course, today, I think this might be the first time, Charles, that we've actually, instead of a motion picture, we are going to Broadway.
That's right. And I can say with a high degree of confidence that I will be most unlikely to attend another Broadway show of any kind. But
yeah, I'm not a big fan of Broadway shows either. But of course, this is a special presentation of Dear Eric Hansen, the Phony Award-winning Best Musical. I was not even aware of this Dear Evan Hansen. I don't know what it's about. I don't know why the character has a broken arm, but of course we see our friend Truman the Tiger is covering Mr. Hansen's face. Now, Charles, I know you had specifically asked me not to contact Eric Hansen, and I don't want to go against your wishes, but I did obtain this very rare video footage of Mr. Hansen, and I thought you'd be interested in seeing that. We can take a look at that. Oop, started from the beginning, perhaps.
Hey, Truman, how do you like those audits? They're great!
A little bit loud there, but I think people get it. I'm still figuring out where, okay, so that's right. Anyway, Truman the Tiger and Eric Hansen from the notorious BKD.
BAD, exactly.
BAD.
So
right.
Sometimes these things, for me anyway, just come together by accident. I was walking up 6th Avenue last week, and I saw this bus go by with a billboard that had, you know, Dear Evan Hansen on it. And then I was walking further up the street, and I see another poster on, you know, some other place next to a bus station or bus little place there, bus stop. And I thought, wow, we can use that. It's simple. We just, you know, change
one word.
Yeah, one word.
Yeah.
But this actually, as it turns out, when I looked it up, the reason that the posters are up all over the place, it actually did win the real thing. Dear Evan Hansen won all kind, best musical, best this, best that. And for me, I'm one of these people, I'll admit it, it's got many faults, but one of them is I cannot tell the difference between one musical and another musical. It's like they're all the same thing to me. They sound the same dance numbers, it's all the same. It's like, I've seen enough of those.
Yeah, I'm really not into Broadway musicals myself.
Yeah.
I don't like them at all. But I tell you, it certainly did not win Best Marketing Department because I never heard of the thing.
I think it's just getting a lot of, I don't know when it came together, but it's certainly popular at this moment.
Okay, well, it's a good thing we've got it before it gets overbooked and everything like that.
That's right.
So what did we want to get to today, Charles?
Well, why don't we start with the first page of the slides.
Sure.
And if we can pull that up. So Eric Hansen, of course, we've explained to people before, is the Chief Operating Officer of an accounting firm that is today large. I forget if it's the 13th or the 10th largest one, but it's an accounting firm that had its start, I believe, in the Midwest, and then it entered into an alliance with multiple international firms to create this thing called Praxity, which is a loosey-goosey alliance of many, many accounting firms all over the place.
Seemingly named after the Klingon moon of Praxis from Star Trek.
Exactly. But the idea was, I think, of putting this together, is that you take this collection of American-based firms that BKD is now, and you put it together with a bunch of international firms, and that, in theory, allows the American accounting group to say, look, if you've got a complex international problem, we can work together.
We just break the law over here.
Yeah, we know how to break law everywhere. But so it's been motoring along, this BKD. It's been in business for decades, and this Praxity thing came together, I want to say 2006, 2008, something like that. But here we have this very strange situation where Eric Hansen, is the chief operating officer, but he's also the chairman of the AICPA, which is the American Institute of Certified Professional Accountants, and also its Klingon twin, the International Society of CPAs. And generally speaking, we're going to go through this. I mean, I don't know how much exposure people in the crowd have to the accounting profession, but my experience with accountants, and I've dealt with them all over the world, and good ones and bad ones, first class ones, and I don't tend to work very, very frequently with the ones that are horrible. They get fired. But the typical approach in corporate and I think in charity law is you want to get an opinion out of an accounting firm as to the financial statements that your management you've put together. You have to write what's called a representation letter. You have to sign a representation letter. You'll enter into a negotiation with the accounting firm. Typically, they don't just take you as a client. They have to do diligence. They have to decide as a first step, can we even audit Charles Ortel's thing, or Jason said, is it even possible?
Because they don't want to represent someone who is, say, I don't know, stealing billions of dollars.
Right, exactly, for very long, unless their take is high enough. But no, seriously, they generally take this stuff very, very seriously. But you can end up, for example, if you take the Madoff case, it's most unwise if you're running a hedge fund, which Madoff in theory was running, to employ an accounting firm that is based in upstate New York with like two guys over a Chinese takeout place. I mean, that's not what you want to check the books and records of a fund.
Was that Madoff's accounting firm?
It really was. If you look it up, you'll see.
In a Chinese restaurant?
I made up the Chinese part, but it was the auditing firm. It wasn't even BKD. It was like many steps down from that, and that should be a red flag to any serious investor. You want powerful, capable, tough accountants to check your books. You don't want people you can push around, and so. So the first step, generally speaking, is you go to a BKD, or you go to Price Waterhouse, or you go to this Cohn-Resnick firm. These are each firms that, in theory, have, quote, audited the Clinton Foundation and pieces of it. And you say, look, I need an audit. And they put you through a ringer. They ask you questions. They check you out. They may not take you. And then what an auditor is trying to do in the very beginning is not necessarily to bless the balance sheet and bless the cash flow statement and bless the footnotes. It's to decide, is this an operation that is well run enough that we can be highly confident that it's not a fraud? I mean, you don't want to get roped in as a BKD, as a Price Waterhouse, as a Cohn-Resnick into producing, quote, audited financial statements for the largest set of unprosecuted frauds in history, because when the thing comes crashing down, as it is now going to come crashing down, you have much more than egg on face. You have that swampy stuff on your face. You have blood on your face. You have arms and limbs all over the place, and, blood and guts. So the first step normally is that you really try to do your homework on your client, and you ask tough questions. You exercise professional skepticism. Now, I'm summarizing here. I mention this very frequently because I feel it's important. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lot of experience having accountants and lawyers work for me, or working with them on deals. So I think, the difference between a good accountant and a bad accountant, good lawyer and a bad lawyer, good banker, bad banker. So the first step is you just try to comply with the rules that pertain to having the license that you have. To be a certified professional accountant, a public accountant rather, you have a license from a state accounting board, maybe multiple state boards, and you can't just walk in and say, well, I know how to park a car, give me a CPA license. It's supposed to be it's even tougher, I believe, to get than an MD, I was told.
What?
Yeah, it's it's tough. There's a lot of continuing education requirements. It's tough to pass the test. It's tough to stay, as an accountant in good standing. And beyond that, you have these various bodies, one of which is this AICPA, that people will join, accountants will join, and there's a massive apparatus in the AICPA of people writing memos and suggested standards on every topic that pertains to accounting. And here you have, as I say, BKD LLP. We're going to show you just how questionable and shoddy their work, how awful their work has been on the Clinton Foundation. You have that chief operating officer of BKD is currently the chairman of the AICPA. So that's like having, a bad, I don't know, mafia guy, is going around killing people in his spare time, and the person who's supposed to discipline the mafia guy is, the head of the mafia.
Well, it's like putting Truman the Tiger in charge of your chicken coop.
Exactly, exactly. Truman, actually, I think, or his evil cousin, False Man, the
right,
Tiger.
False Man the Tiger.
So we've been talking about this, and we've been trying to build a case step by step for the audience, because it's a complicated case. It has wide-ranging implications and ramifications. But we wanted to try to acquaint people with these things, like what is an audit, and what is the AICPA, what is BKD, and why does any of this matter? Well, it matters when it comes to a head. It matters because if you're trying to get, as the Clinton Foundation and many of the entities within and around the Clinton Foundation have year ends, or years that end for their financial years, December 31st. So the way the rules end up working out is that you have until November 15th, 2018 to turn in to the IRS and many states and many international bodies reports that are due on each of these charities that have to be accompanied by an audit, a real audit from a real firm that truly is independent. To get that audit across the line, the Clinton Foundation CEO and chief executive and chief financial officer have to sign a representation letter where whoever is trying to audit this thing now, and maybe it's Cohn-Resnick, they're the people who did it for 2016, they better have been watching Sunday with Charles and his equivalents. They better have been doing their homework, because one of the standard questions that an accounting firm will ask you, representations they'll ask you to make, is that you are not aware of any accusations of fraud against your organization. And they can't say that at this point. They have to be aware at this point. The publicity on this is massive. So an accounting firm, you see somebody do, I guess this is our 115th broadcast.
Yeah.
And it's happening now just at the same time as somebody has been making a racket about this firm, General Electric, for 10 years, 11 years. And on Tuesday, General Electric is going to confront their analysts and the wider public and have to explain what the hell the new CEO thinks is going to happen. Are they going to keep the dividend? Are they going to cut the dividend? There could be a lot of turmoil in GE. And I went through a process on GE starting in August of 2007, where I began a process of exposing a far more complicated fraud. Eventually, things catch up to even these big frauds. When I started on GE, it was $900 billion in value, debt and equity. Now it's 250.
It's gone down since the last time we looked at it. It's 11.3, another 4.2% down. But when is this since?
That's what happened on Friday. It was down 4% on Friday, over 4% on Friday, in a day when the market was down less than 2%. So the market is not thinking that this is, if you hit that year-to-date YTD.
Do you think it's gone down 4.20% because Elon Musk smoked weed with Joe Rogan?
I don't know.
It might be a bit out there.
But that gives you a longer time frame. And since January, you see how much it's gone down. I wrote a piece in February. Well, we have this later. But what's happening is that Mr. Hansen, his colleagues at BKD, his colleagues in Praxity around the world, and his colleagues at the American Institute of CPAs and its international equivalent, better be watching the situation at the Clinton Foundation, because the correct way to deal with this, if I were involved with this, I would say that BKD, all right, Hansen can have nothing to do with the analysis of countering what Charles is saying and Jason's saying on this Clinton Foundation stuff. We got to pick somebody with credibility. We may have to hire an outside person of BKD to go in and check these audits to figure out the work that BKD has done in the past. And if Charles is right, if all these shows are right, and so far not a single person has come to me since March 16th, 2015, when I began on the Clinton Foundation crusade, and said, listen, dude, you got it wrong. Not one person has said that, and not one firm. The Clinton Foundation hasn't even dared to do that. So you're heading down this point where there's a lot of evidence that there could be massive unprosecuted fraud here. You've got an accounting firm in BKD that has put, its name, statement after statement, year in and year out, of not just the main Clinton Foundation, but the Clinton Global Initiative, Inc., the Clinton Health Access Initiative, who knows what other ventures. Their name is all over documents that are circulating in the public domain across the 50 states, in Washington, D.C., around the world. And there comes a moment in time where a donor, a defrauded donor ultimately, will be within his or her rights to say, look, BKD is supposed to be a great accounting firm. How come they didn't rescind these audits, their prior work, now that they've discovered that most likely prior representation letters that may have been made by Bruce Lindsay and Andrew Kessel, the CEO and CFO, prior representations made to BKD to get historical auditing statements done are wrong.
Well, Charles, I didn't tell you this, but I've received some early word as to the unbiased third party they're going to be bringing in to oversee Eric Hansen's work. He's
Right.
sure to find all the problems. He's doing nothing but.
Well, because he proved he couldn't find them from 2001 to 2005 when he was looking at this really hard, September 2001. September 4th, 2001 to September 4th, 2013, when he was head of the FBI, as the Clinton Foundation frauds escalated.
Well, I mean, listen, to be fair, Charles, 4 double whiskeys at lunch make it pretty hard to see fraud. But anyway, back to the slides.
Yeah, so we now have this firm deadline. I've been very happy to let days pass and weeks pass with nothing happen, but November 15th, 2018, this Clinton Foundation has got to get an audit from somewhere, and it's got to be a credible firm. And as I said in the past, they'll do what they want. They want to compound their legal liability, both their civil and criminal penalties. Then don't try to fix the mess that's already out there. Just leave it as it is, or claim that you bleach bit all the historical documents. You don't have any evidence. Go down that path, and you're talking about, I believe, for the Clinton Foundation personnel, billions and billions of liability. And for BKD, who knows?
Wow. All right.
So without any further ado, for the new people, and I notice you're almost at 69,000 subscribers, which is...
There's been a lot of pressure on the subscribership for the past short, little recent period, and I don't know why that is. It could have reached a saturation point, or there could be some outside interference. Whenever I see feline, fanatical preppers making videos about my subscribers or whatever, I always feel like maybe that person knows something more about it than I do. So I don't know if there's interference going on, but we're getting close to 69,000.
Which is...
Patreon is growing nicely. We've got a lot of people who are joining us on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And Charles, you brought something to my attention that I wasn't exactly aware of. We're normally going out on gab.ai and all these other networks, but when I tried to access that this morning, I had a problem. We're still on Periscope, we're still on Facebook, we're still on vk.com, but there's something wrong with gab.ai today, and now it's on. It wasn't letting me initiate a video earlier when I wanted to try to do that, but what have you heard about this?
I think there's a story on Zero Hedge about the synagogue shooter in Pittsburgh, I think, had either had a Gab account or there was something on, so I'll have to pull the story up, but I thought I read that there was some action taken against Gab.
It's definitely having some kind of problem this morning. It wouldn't let me create a video, and now this is my Gab page, which is normally filled up with videos, but now it's got nothing there. So who knows what's going on? It is important that we keep these alternative platforms viable. I really do believe it's been a major portion of the sort of globalist strategy to control social media. And I think attacking some of these alternative platforms to corral people is something that they've been doing very actively. We've seen Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and even the CEO, Melissa, what's her name? The CEO of YouTube, a little bit less in the public eye than those guys, but there's all this stuff going on.
Yeah, but nonetheless, you managed to build almost 69,000 subscribers. And for the new people who are watching this show for the first time today, what we are trying to do, and I think what we're succeeding in doing, is bringing you a format that you're not going to see on cable TV, you're not going to see on broadcast TV. What we're trying to do is engage you, the audience, in a process of bringing justice for long last to the most ardent, determined, unrepentant set of fraudsters that that breathe air.
That have ever fallen down
Yeah.
a flight of stairs.
that being Bill, Hillary, and sadly now Chelsea Clinton and others, who think that it's okay to pretend that what they're operating is a charity, when in fact it's nothing more than a gigantic influence peddling scheme. We heard recently that Chelsea has decided that she may in fact give us the pleasure of her public service at some later date should somebody step down or retire. She will let us know that she's going to join the dynasty. I mean, I'm very enamored of people who truly serve this country. They tend to be on the front lines or helping those on the front lines in the military, first responders, people like that, even people who serve in the House and the Senate and elsewhere. But this idea that your gracious service, where you suddenly start living like a multi-billionaire at the expense of the taxpayer, and you set up one or more foundations to mooch off all of us, and then expect us all to be very happy with you, is repugnant. And that's what we've been trying to instigate change here. Thanks to Jason, we've been able to put together, and thank you for this. This is, I think, our 115th broadcast. Average length about 2 hours. We always try to take the viewership through this fraud from a slightly different perspective so that you begin to understand the full elements. We are pitching this primarily to investigators, to people who have the ability, government authorities who have the ability to put real resources on the study of these frauds. And we're doing this as a public service. We want this fraud, this set of charities, in quotes, should be put into conservatorship as soon as possible. They should not be allowed to solicit one more red cent or blue cent or purple cent. And there needs to be, with a conservator in place, there needs to then be an honest accounting of what truly happened here. Money needs to be recovered, both from the Clintons and the trustees, but also from the donors.
Now, Charles, I'm not sure what Chelsea would do if she were to run, but perhaps the President's Council on Loose Stools is looking for a new chairperson, and Chelsea could join there.
We do get in trouble bringing this up, and it's so easy to, as it were, blacken her reputation by going down this. But it truly is quite a serious problem in the developing world involving children, because when children start getting diarrhea,
dehydration,
they get and there's no water, and
you can die
very quickly from it. So it's a fair point. But I wish that she would not do things as stupidly as she is doing them, which is to, say that she lost interest in making money. It's why do that? I'm sure that's right. When people are just going to walk in the front door with a wheelbarrow of donations and say, "Take this."
Yeah.
Why would you work?
I think she said she doesn't care about money, and the reason is she has all the money anyone could ever need. So why, not a concern, really.
She has your money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terribly concerned about food because it's readily accessible, but I bet you some of these children starving and dying with diarrhea probably think about it all the time.
Exactly.
Now, Charles, this is our 115th broadcast together.
That's right, thank you.
That's quite a few. Although, you know what? There have actually been a few more, because the strange death of Peter Smith and a couple of episodes where you've appeared as a special guest I don't include in this playlist. But of course, on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, which is the home of Crowdsource the Truth, people can find the Sunday with Charles playlist, and that's got all of the episodes of Sunday with Charles and also all of the episodes of Charles Ortel is Closing In. So, whether you're Eric Hansen trying to figure out what you're going to do with your season tickets to the Missouri, whatever he was doing there with Truman the Tiger, or if you're someone investigating that guy, you might want to check out these videos. There's several hundred hours of evidence, and it's a growing database of prima facie evidence of fraud, I would say.
Exactly. And it's high time that people do something about it, because one of the reasons, before I got into this exercise, I thought about the pluses and minuses of investing this amount of time and energy. And it struck me that people, I think, unfairly categorize me as simply being a Clinton hater. I'm not a Clinton hater, I'm a fraud hater. And it just so happens that, if you're going to dedicate your life to fraud, then I'm probably going to hate you.
A lot.
Right, you run it. But for the same reason, I'm concerned, frankly, about the Obama Foundation. I warned them. I took the trouble to warn them several different ways, and I had a lengthy conversation with somebody who could have done something about it. And instead of amending their articles of incorporation, at last I checked, instead of trying to do things properly in conformity with laws, I think the Obama team is in the delusional caravan, not the one down in Central America heading north, but the delusional caravan that thinks that Donald Trump is not going to do well in the midterms, and that he might be impeached or he might be driven
Obama
off.
still thinks he's the president. He's giving speeches about how he's fixing the economy, even though he's been like kite surfing for the past 2 years.
Exactly, and skeet shooting.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Now, Charles, the number one thing that people bring up to me when I start sharing facts and evidence I've learned from you about the Clinton Foundation is that they just immediately come back and say, oh, but the Trump Foundation.
Right. Well, so the Trump Foundation is a different ball of wax. The Clinton Foundation, most of the Clinton Foundations, or many of them, are what are called public charities. They stand in the shoes of government. They therefore must be publicly supported. They must be independent. They can't be controlled by a family. And their purposes must be specific and approved in advance by the IRS and by state, local, and foreign governments. So recognizing those strict rules carry with them harsh penalties. The Clintons said, our approach to that is going to be, we're not going to do anything in compliance with the law. That's their public charity. The Trump Foundation, I think there is at least one, there may be more than one, is a private grant-making family foundation, slightly different. Yes, New York State is alleging that the Donald J. Trump Foundation may not have complied with New York State laws and maybe some federal laws. And yes, perhaps New York State is right to investigate this thing, but I would point out there's a difference of magnitude. I decided if I was going to focus on things, I would take my time focusing on the biggest problems, not the smallest problems. So in terms of math, this Donald J. Trump Foundation, I think we're talking about $20 million, which is a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to the $3 billion in the Clinton Foundation. And on top of that, I estimate that when you consider all contours of the Clinton Foundation frauds, or the ones that are easy to discern, you're up in the $100 billion range. Donald Trump, yes, he is the current president, but in the case of the Clintons, you got Bill Clinton, who had been president for 8 years, who was impeached, not convicted, who then decided that for his final act, what he would do is be a charity fraudster. So, I mean, it seems to me it's a bigger story than cleaning up and how who is this, Charity Navigator saying low concern?
I think we need to do an investigation into Charity Navigator. They're not at all concerned. They don't even have a moderate concern about the Clinton Foundation, but they have a high degree of concern about the Trump Foundation based on what they've read in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal.
Well, actually, we did have Doug White on, who was one of the founders of Charity Navigator.
But he's no longer there, is he?
Right, but he for good reason. He thinks he's suspicious of this Charity Navigator. I've looked into Charity Navigator. It's a tiny concern, and they clearly don't know much about the Clinton Foundation.
But it's interesting how these sort of entities get founded. This reminds me very much of Snopes. We don't know who's running this. We don't know what criteria they're using. They're referencing mainstream news articles about the Trump Foundation that give them great concern. What's that?
This is news to me. Alex Chan when did Alex Chan become chief executive officer of the Clinton Foundation?
Who is he?
I don't know. It's Jackie's brother. I mean, it's possible that this happened. I thought the guy's name, let's Google that while we're at it. That's
sure.
News to me.
Alex Chan Clinton Foundation.
See what, that's news. And you know, the Clinton Foundation, strengthening the capacity of people to meet the challenges of global interdependence is not an authorized charitable endeavor, and it's barely English. I mean, it's an absurd general statement. Did he just join?
Well, here he is.
No, see, that's not even the right thing. That's the Clinton Health Matters initiative. Had you pulled up? See, he's not the CEO of the whole thing. He's the CEO of this non-existent legally Clinton Health Matters initiative, for which the Clinton Foundation is not authorized. The CEO, let's just see, founder and board chair, vice chair.
What's the asterisk?
Independent director in theory.
Doesn't list a CEO.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Bruce Lindsay, counselor to the chair.
Wasn't he the CEO?
He
at one
was
point?
for a while, yeah. We're going to be doing quite an analysis of Bruce Lindsay. He has I think he's still a lawyer, and as such, he's a member of the bar. He was a member of the bar, I believe, of Little Rock. So he has special obligations, which he has not discharged, in my view. That's amazing. So if we go back to the Charity Navigator thing, it's so accurate. This is the correct EIN for the Clinton Foundation. That is not the correct name of the Clinton Foundation. And the CEO is certainly not Alex Chan. Other than that, you know.
How'd you like the play?
I mean, it's ridiculous. You're going to get excited about what Charity Navigator? You may as well go down to the street corner, right? And you could just look there, look away from the street lights, right? And then turn back around, and if the street light is green, then you could say the charity is good. I mean, this is an absurd service, frankly. Just look at this. This is something that deserves to be investigated aggressively.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like a lot of these things that are put there to lend credence to something are themselves fake constructs.
Right. Well, that's during the financial crisis. So that's one of the things I pounded the table on. The financial crisis of 7, 8, 9. People were getting, and still are getting, too sloppy, saying that, well, because Moody's and S&P, the bond rating agencies, gave this debt issuance a AAA rating, that means it's good. Don't worry about it. Don't do any homework.
Why check the checker?
Well, exactly. Well, it's exactly what you need to check. The bond rating agencies, the SEC, certainly these silly Charity Navigator people who can't seem to get anything right. And the reason I'm a little harsh on Charity Navigator is the Clintons pick up on this. Whenever they try to defend the Clinton Foundation, we're rated 4 stars by Charity Navigator.
Right.
Okay, great.
And Snopes says everything they put out is real news.
Right. Amazing. So if we maybe jump back in.
Yes. Oh, well, we forgot to discuss Twitter, Charles. How has everything been going on your Twitter feed?
I am back up again, almost at 32.5, but it's been stuck for a while. This is interesting, actually, that Kanye West and Candace Owens have got this new apparel line they're bringing out, which they're calling it Blexit, as a takeoff on Brexit.
That's good.
Asking black people to leave the Democratic Party. Now that's something else.
That's great. Yeah. And then, of course, people who aren't yet following you can go onto Twitter and follow you at Charles Ortel. I would like to encourage our viewers to follow us on Twitter if they aren't already. It's a good way to have an alternative method of receiving information about suppression on other social media platforms. And certainly with 68,000 YouTube subscribers, I would think the several thousand people that will see this video, there's got to be some who aren't following on Twitter. I'm still stuck in this rut. Can't seem to get over 24.3, which, again, just curious. Could be a plateau. But didn't President Trump put out a tweet very recently saying that Twitter is suppressing people?
He may have, and I think he noticed that his own followership was dropping.
Right. And he said he was going to investigate it.
Interesting.
Oh, you know what I also wanted to talk about? Are we going to talk about the pipe bomb guy at all?
We can, yeah.
Because Beauregard Sessions was right out front, very chatty at that press conference. I was like, hey, wait, he's still alive. Where has this guy been? He's way out in front on the fake bomb issue.
You're talking about Forrest Gump's uncle?
Yes, Forrest Gunkle.
Anyway. So yeah, if we could just jump back into the flow here a little bit. We've shown everybody the list of 115. All right. There's a story in here on Yahoo, which Yahoo, I used to enjoy Yahoo, but no longer. We have different narratives on the midterm election. It started out early on. The idea is that the idea was sold as late as, let's say, a year ago, or as early as a year ago. It was sold the idea that suburban moms and others were going to come out, and millennials were going to come out in droves to tilt the House, tilt the Senate to progressive Democrats. That was the narrative. And that narrative so far does not yet seem, it's not really being borne out in early voting results, state by state. Now, then Hillary and others tried to stoke up anger against Trump. She wasn't going to be civil and all that stuff, and Holder was going to kick you when you were down. Then we had these deplorable incidents, and it's worth, I don't want to give too much attention to these various shooters and violent people, because violence should have no place in political discourse anywhere, but particularly in the United States of America. We're a very rich country. We shouldn't be coming to blows before an election that actually do kill people. And so now what the narrative is, Americans are fed up with this
violence.
This violence.
They're calling for violence last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Now they're saying people are fed up with it.
Yeah, we don't like that violence anymore, and trying to pin it on President Trump and on Republicans. So I think what may be happening here, we'll know in very shortly, in like 9 days. What could be happening is another set of safe spaces and crying places and all that are going to be required, and they're probably going to have to be a whole new majors set up at college and university, and we'll get some whaling and all that kind of stuff. Because I think the various pundits that were so wrong in 2016 are about to be proven incredibly wrong yet again, that they've learned absolutely nothing from the experience of 2016.
And will you endow some university with the Charles Ortel safe space? People can go and cry and receive free crayons or something like that?
I don't think we need to do that.
We don't need to do that, okay.
So, and here we have the spectacle of the president, former president, thinking that it's a smart move for him to go out and start giving these speeches where he tears into President Trump. I mean, it was bad enough when he was several weeks ago going around the world trying to say that, remember who started this economic recovery. Remember to thank Barack Obama. And, I don't think it's a strong move with the record that Barack Obama has, that we can look at now from 2008 or 2009 to 2017, January to January, to say nobody in my administration got indicted is one of his. Well, no, but the point is, why do you think that happened? I mean, you had Eric Holder as your attorney general who said that his mission was to cover Barack Obama's back. And then you finish that up with Loretta Lynch, who thinks it's a good idea in the middle of this epic investigation, fake investigation into the Clinton Foundation, to go meet with Bill Clinton by accident. The reason nobody was indicted is the fix was in while you were president. You made sure of that, and the fix is now coming unstuck. So this is, I think, a very lame set of arguments.
No, but I love this quote. I want to say that. It's almost like I want to say, Mr. Obama, what do you think the biggest problem in the United States was from 2008 to 2016? Oh, nobody in my administration got indicted. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
His scandal-free administration.
Yeah, so this was not a strong move. No. And if they would go back in the slide there, yeah. And then this one, I don't even like to bring up Avenatti, the third one, but here we have frankly, an idiot, another idiot from NBC deciding having covered themselves in the muck over this whole Kavanaugh circus environment where they nearly wrecked, multiple people's lives. Now this idiot's going to come forward and explain the real reason why they had exculpatory evidence during the hearings, but they decided to sit on it because they were checking it. And now they're going to bring out the fact that actually all along they knew that some of these people were not credible, the very people that Avenatti was saying were credible. I mean, this is just silliness.
It's actually horrible because they're creating this sort of standard whereby, everybody said, oh, it's not a court of law, it's just a job interview. So they're basically endorsing this notion of throwing away our most important beliefs of holding somebody innocent until proven guilty. They're suppressing evidence that shows that the guy is innocent or supports his innocence, and pushing this fake narrative that he's a rapist and a gang rapist and evil.
Right. It's horrible. I mean, imagine this idiot, whoever it is, imagine if this had happened to you, right? To you, Kate. Would you like to be treated this way? Would you like, you're trying to get some nice position and somebody makes false allegations about you and NBC decides that even though they know the allegations are provably false,
so we're
just going to do it anyway just to make your life miserable. And then, think about what you have done by this action to Kavanaugh's two daughters. Just think about that for a second. At the crucial moment in their lives, their young lives, one of them was like 10, one was like 13, whatever. Think about the pain that you have caused that family by this asinine decision of yours. And now you're going to come out and bring the topic back up. I mean, I don't know which is dumber, what you did, when not releasing the exculpatory evidence, or what you're doing now explaining what you did. It's tough for me to decide at this moment.
Well, the only place where it's not a court of law thing actually holds up and has any teeth is here, because if, as a prosecutor, she withheld exculpatory evidence, she'd be on the hook. That's a crime.
I know.
Unbelievable, Charles. The level of stupidity in our country is rising dramatically.
Yeah. So today we have, an election down in Brazil, and they're calling this guy, Bolsonaro, I think his name is, the tropical Trump.
Yeah.
And wondering whether he's going to actually lead Brazil or attempt to lead Brazil out of the latest set of messes that Brazil is in. And I think this could be, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but this could be quite a significant set of developments. Jair?
Where is it?
Jair. I don't know.
Hair.
Hair? Okay.
I don't know. Well, in Portuguese, R is usually H. So there could be Jai.
J? I don't know, whatever.
Who knows?
But it's quite likely that he's going to win, and if he does win, then we're going to see even more turmoiling down in Brazil. Again, one of my grandmothers was from Brazil, and I've been there many times. It's a lovely place.
Love Brazil.
But I think I'm encouraged. I hope that this person gets in, but I hope he doesn't go down the path of the right-wing dictatorship, which didn't do much for Brazil from 64 to 85. I
hope tropical Trump becomes a cocktail.
Now here, you mentioned this shadow banning. Now this Zero Hedge piece is quite foreboding. It talks about how shadow banning is only a portion of the things that can happen to you. We see this piece here.
Yeah, the mouse is particularly elusive today. I don't know why.
So you could take, and this is giving a plug here for your Patreon, but
is it?
Yeah, it says just that the only bulwark against being silenced is Patreon.
Really? Wow, that's great. Well, I'll take this opportunity to recommend that people go over to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I think it actually is, just because of the way it's set up, pretty good, because it's, it really diversifies who's controlling the video network, who's controlling the payment network, who's controlling the website where those things come together. In the case of YouTube, they've got the ads, they've got the video server, they've got the subscription database all in one thing. So they hold so much power over your channel. In the case of Patreon, if something were to go wrong with Vimeo, for instance, I could put videos on there from some other server. And if something goes wrong with PayPal, we could have it paid by somebody else. So it is very good. But sorry, back to the article.
Yeah, it's just, this is a cautionary article summarizing for people who are new to the topic and have not yet been victims of shadow banning and other suppression, that unless things change, and I'm hopeful in the new Congress, things will change, that there'll be hearings, that people think through the growing lack of power that users have over data they input into search engines, data they input in other ways.
Wow.
And the degree to which the unequal treatment, wherein people like you and like me put a lot of valuable content on the air and don't get remotely compensated the way the owners of Google and the owners of these other platforms get compensated, in particular the greedy tycoons out in Silicon Valley. So I think we're going to begin to get, the people in Silicon Valley tend to lean to the left, many of them, and are fond of financing economically illiterate Democrats, perhaps because it makes sense to have such people sit on, decide not to actually regulate the SEC and not to regulate things properly. But nonetheless, I think a public debate is really being joined now on, how should these platforms in fact be regulated, and how, if you're going to be bounced off a platform at a crucial moment, should there be some kind of a appeals process, a more normal process where you find out, you get a warning, or you find out
at least what you've done wrong. In the case of YouTube, when Crowdsource the Truth was banned from uploading for 3 months, they didn't even tell me exactly what the offense was. And then they gave me another ban within a day for, I guess, doing the same thing, but they never said what it was.
Right.
And it also, they've got this whole anonymous platform where anyone can create a fake account. You could create thousands of these fake accounts. We've even seen videos from feline preparatory EMS workers who say they've got control over thousands of accounts, and you could, complain from thousands of accounts. Who knows how that triggers the algorithm for one of these things, and it's a way to bully people online.
Not good. Or as Donald Trump would say, bad.
Not good.
Yeah, not good. So we talk a lot about Sweden, and here's a story again on Zero Hedge, which I highly recommend, about Sweden losing the war against cash and possibly reversing. What's going on
here today?
Deep state interference.
I'm not going to say that, but I'm seemingly unable to click on things. There, it's coming over here for some reason. Very annoying.
There you go. So I personally think that the battle against cash is really stupid. I mean, what you see is around the world and across history, black markets spring up. That's just the way. If you ban cash, then people will start using an equivalent, something. They'll create something else that counterparties will agree can be traded or used as an equivalent. And I think, particularly given the great power that financial institutions have vis-a-vis an individual consumer, I think a nice discipline against that is to allow people to use cash. And so I'm hopeful that this trend, relentlessly driving towards a cashless global society will, stop and ideally reverse.
What do you think about this chart here, Charles?
That, it's still a lot of cash to have in circulation, and we don't really know. In a place like Sweden, you have the Swedish currency, but you can also have, which is the kroner, and then you also have the euro, and you have British pounds, and you have just by tracking this, you're not really tracking
maybe there's
cash.
A black market for dollars.
Oh, of course there is,
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. I mean, when I was in Sweden, people definitely mentioned this to me a lot. That they noticed there were a lot of shops that just would not accept cash. And there was one guy, a friend of Ole's, whose nickname was Johnny Cash, because everywhere he went, he wanted to use cash. And if the store would not accept it, he would leave and go somewhere else.
Well, judging just New York City, Manhattan, where I walk around a lot, I think stores are at this point happy to take cash, credit, anything. They're having a hard store
Well,
after.
retail in Manhattan is going out, virtually gone.
It's amazing to me now. Day by day, you're seeing anecdotal, because I walk everywhere, different routes, and I'm just amazed. Each day, there's a new store out of nowhere that's just gone with no notice.
Yeah, I wanted to buy some solder the other day, and I remembered that Radio Shack is out of business. So
That's true.
just can't get that anymore.
Still gone.
Better order it from Amazon.
Yeah, I
Wait a
think
day.
I have bought solder never times. So then you have this question, which is we've got various authors coming to us, which we're going to try to feature more and more of them. But this question on automation and robots, we've got an author that I think you might want to interview.
Somehow the mouse has become invisible. I don't understand why that
Well, I
is.
could talk to the topic if you
No,
can.
no, no, we're going to show it.
There you go.
So
The question is whether, when we think about the impact of robots and driverless cars and things like that, what we should be thinking about is, in my view, if we suddenly go, as people are talking about, to driverless cars, you're going to have millions and millions of people out of work
yeah.
all of a sudden. And that's going to be rough because while our economy is very hot right now and the unemployment rates are low in general and by minority groups, it's all great stuff. You start dumping millions and millions of people out of work onto the economy, that could have quite a negative impact. On the other hand, if as a result of changing the way in which you provide services, if, for example, at Uber, if it's still around, starts using driverless cars, if the impact of that is that you decide you're going to lower fares,
No.
well, no, you should. It should
They
be.
won't.
Well, a new entrant might. You see, as a guess, fares will go down.
Well, I think what is likely to happen, first of all, I don't think it's going to happen overnight. This technology will be introduced. It'll take time for fleets of trucking companies and taxi companies to refresh or whatever. So there'll be some transition period, but I agree with you, it's going to be a big shift to driverless cars. I was just thinking the other day that, rental cars will go down because people will be, using these driverless cars. Maybe companies like Hertz, car sales might go down.
Definitely go down.
So companies like Ford, General Motors, perhaps they'll get into the business. I mean, how difficult would it be for a company like Ford to purchase a software thing that enables an Uber service versus a company like Uber creating cars that, I don't know, it seems like there should be more competition there.
Well, I think the headline is, and it's important obviously to select a language of expression that will let you see the trend, which is something that we don't often focus enough upon. If I would just simply put, without getting into a lot of minutia, we are going to do minutia today in just a bit, but without getting into it on this topic, if you can think back to 1999, 1998, how much, I don't know if you were working full-time at that moment, but in 1998 and 1999, I would, generally speaking, have my weekend off. I was not connected to the internet all the time. You were not expected to be, reachable by email 24/7. And all that changed at some moment. For me, it was more like 2001 to that time frame when broadband internet made these platforms a lot more interesting to use and a lot faster, and you could do a lot more creative things with them. You went from being, in most jobs, in a place where you work 40 hours a week, or if you're a hard ass, you work 60, 70 hours a week, whatever. But at least if you planned ahead, you could have your weekend off. You could go home and you wouldn't have to check your email and do all this kind of stuff. So when you start thinking about the fact that incomes, adjusted for inflation, incomes haven't really gone up that much.
Yeah.
In that 98, 99, that was like a peak for income. And adjusting for inflation, you tell me what inflation rate you want to use. Then adjust for the fact that now in 2017, 18, if you're working hard, 19, you might be working, if you count fairly all the time you spend on walking down the street, looking at your smartphone, and then commuting, and then at home and on the weekend, you might actually be working or earning a lot less per hour. Even if you progressed up, through a hierarchy in a job or a profession, you might be making a lot less in 2018 than you were making in 1998 per minute or per hour. And that suggests to me that trend may not be our friend, but it may be the trend that will obtain as you then go to a place where suddenly the owners of these businesses or of businesses don't have to deal with the ugly side of managing human beings. And most human beings are difficult to manage. I mean, it's not like they walk in every day and they're always happy and don't have problems, no issues, no conflicts, and don't want to fight, and are never satisfied. I mean, so you take that out of the equation, and you say, well, okay, instead of having to just manage a human, I can put one robot to replace one human, and now that I like that, I'll get 10 robots to replace, and the next thing you know, you'll be you'll be Amazon with its warehouses, or you'll be trading for Wall Street, where there are very few humans involved in trading anymore as compared to what it was like in 1998. So if we're talking about trends that are really worth worrying about and thinking about, this is one of them. And I think on the investing side, it's likely that vast fortunes will be made over time as this trend takes hold. But how they're going to be made is anyone's guess at this point.
Now, Charles, I don't know if you saw this item, but I think Japan is the first country to make it legal to marry a robot. First robot wedding.
What could possibly go wrong with that one?
I don't know, but 2 robots got married. No, I saw that there was a law that humans can marry robots. Now, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely crazy.
Well, I wonder what Hillary's stance is on
I think
same voltage marriage.
I think we could get Laura Loomer to ask that question.
Right.
So we talk a lot about the market and from time to time, and I have tried to warn people that storm clouds look very, very dark. And in the last 2 to 4 weeks, we've had several long periods where the stock market has been very volatile and has headed way down in price in certain things, and up in yield in certain types of bond instruments. This moment in time, I hope we get through this week without a straight-up crash. But there's a lot of commentary coming from places that I think where there's smart people, that we could well have an unfortunate set of events all happen at the same time. China is very heavily overextended. I was on last week with John Batchelor and Gordon Chang talking about that. Gordon's one of the world's experts on China and Asia. And of course the trade tension, trade spat with China doesn't help. We could see a day of reckoning looming. It's overdue for China, where they've blown up the biggest bubble on earth. And now their most attractive and important market, the US, is increasingly being shut off to them. So that's one thing. You have in Europe, you have the fact that the banking system in Europe is heavily extended, that Europe is not like the United States of America in that it is not united. It is a whole bunch of separate nations pretending that they're Europe, and there's, it's a continent. So North America is a continent. That's great too, but there's no North American government, and there's no effective European government. And what has happened is there's so much wealth in Europe, they've allowed these banks to get gigantic and to lend too much money, principally in risky places like emerging markets, without having inside the individual nation, inside of Germany, inside of Belgium, enough checking deposits, free money for a bank that gives you the cushion to do all these speculative things that banks do.
When will they learn, Charles? I mean, isn't this obvious when they're doing things that are sort of so risky and stupid that
I think it's pronounced never.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then you have as well anti-Trumpers spoiling for black marks on the American economy and setting up, I would argue, to short the American economy. So there's a lot invested at this moment in time before the election by some, invested in quotes, I don't mean financially alone, but a lot of people hoping that there would be some sort of crash, because that would then lend weight to arguments against Trump and his policies. So I tread very carefully. And the key thing, and not just because I have been involved in it, but one key marker will be this analyst meeting that occurs, I don't know what time it is on Tuesday, but I wrote this piece in February of 2018 based on a lot of work that's in the public domain and a lot of great familiarity with GE. But I think the probability that GE doesn't make it in its present incarnation without putting some portion of the firm into bankruptcy or without doing a highly dilutive equity share offering is a probability that needs to be taken seriously. The financial reports out of GE are just very disheartening. It's been in restructuring mode for, this is its 11th year of restructuring.
Wow.
You know, and it's not like they're paying the people.
How long does it usually take to restructure a company?
Depends. I mean,
11 sounds like a long time. You could build a company on the moon in 11 years.
Exactly. And especially, this is at a moment in time where it's not clear that an existing company has an advantage against a startup. I mean, so many of the success stories we see on Wall Street and elsewhere are, you know, concept companies that come out of nowhere, and next thing you know, it's Amazon. Right. So the fact that you've got all these employees and retirees and plants and liabilities at GE is not a positive, I don't think. And so this will be a very big meeting. Let's hope, I don't wish the employees, the line employees and the retirees of GE ill will. I do think, however, the management, the large number of managers at GE have pulled tens of millions, in some cases hundreds of millions and billions of dollars out of this, you know, let's just say deeply troubled company at a time when they haven't made sure that the pension plan is fully funded, when they haven't put enough money aside, in my opinion, for their environmental and other tax liabilities, when they haven't really been paying that much in the way of taxes. This is a lesson that should unite people on the right and the left to say, it's fine to chase profit, but you have to play by the rules, and the companies have to pay their workers, and they have to pay their taxes, and they have obligations to communities, and they've got to honor all those obligations before they start letting executives claim success when the only ones who are succeeding are the executives. So I know you did a story, you did quite a few things about the Shermans, but...
Yeah, well, yesterday I did a piece with David Hawkins. It turns out that the lawyer for the Sherman family, the estate, has, well, this says 7.6 million.
That's US.
Ah, there you go. So it's 10 million Canadian. Oh, I see, yeah. Well, the fact is they're offering a multi-million-dollar reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever may be responsible for the murder. Of course, this is the pharmaceutical billionaire and his wife who were discovered hanging in their home in Canada, which was originally ruled a murder-suicide, but in a very rare occurrence, the police have officially overturned that ruling, and it is now being treated as a double murder. So David Hawkins called me up yesterday, and he's been doing his very unique reverse engineering style to try to shed some light on this, and pointed out a few things. This detective from the I guess the Toronto police sort of stuttering and stammering when he first presented that it was you know, no cause for alarm, that they weren't looking into other killers or anything like that. But there's a lot of strange characters surrounding this Barry Sherman. He's hated by members of his family who claim that he stole their father's business to create this Apotex pharmaceutical. You, of course, have spoken about how Apotex was one of the generic pharmaceutical companies that was involved with the Clinton Foundation. He was one of the most litigious people in the pharmaceutical industry. Every article where someone is asked about him, who's a competitor or whatever, they say he's litigating like crazy. And someone who does that to such a great extent, who isn't a lawyer, who's there, you know, involved in litigation as their work, I would say it's likely that at least some of this litigation was what we might classify as lawfare, where he's just bringing lawsuits even though he may know they're not appropriate or adequate. When you do that, particularly when you're a billionaire and dealing at that high level, the person who's the target of the lawsuit really has to evaluate what's the likelihood of winning, what's the cost of defending, what's the cost of settling, And it doesn't necessarily mean that he's suing somebody because they deserve to be sued. Could be using that as a lever, and could be a motive for someone to want to kill him.
Well, this whole Canadian case, we've done several podcasts on the Canadian angles in the Clinton Foundation. The true story of the degree to which Canadian laws and Canadian vehicles have been used to launder money, to make illegal payments to politicians, not simply the Clintons, but around the world, is a subject that will get addressed. It's just, I think it's taking the Trump administration, I don't have any inside knowledge, but I think that, I suspect and hope that the Trump administration is taking its time to make sure that the investigators go over all the many aspects of this to, for example, find out, just to pick one small thing, why the Clinton-Giustra Sustainable Growth Initiative and the Enterprise Partnership, that vehicle that was started, I think, in 2006 or 7, how come the Clinton Foundation has never declared that it had control or influence over a Canadian bank account when it had an agency agreement, according to public disclosures, controlling that joint venture, which was based in Canada from, I believe, offices in New York? I mean, there's just look at that, and how come there's never been an accounting of the money that was raised in 2006, 20 million Canadian, for Bill's birthday party?
Wow.
How come that hasn't been properly explained anywhere in the Clinton Foundation? Or Frank Giustra claiming that he gave 31 million and change to fight HIV/AIDS starting in 2005 or 6, and that number doesn't appear. And there's so many unanswered questions up in Canada.
And when you speak about money laundering, this is a character who seems to be popping up quite frequently in association with Frank D'Angelo. Frank D'Angelo was a Hollywood actor, producer, singer, director, kind of a Hollywood hustler, who was also the CEO of a brewery that was owned by Sherman. And D'Angelo and Sherman had a very unusual relationship. I don't know how many billionaires that invest in, independent film. It's one thing to be a billionaire and invest in X-Men or something like that, but $1 million film is a terrible investment, I'm sure you would agree. They rarely recuperate their money, but this guy is one of the Ontario Provincial Police, Mike Ritigliano. I mean, this police officer has had such an alarming succession of criminal charges brought against him. We have to presume he's at least somehow involved, or why would these charges keep coming back up? And he is a close associate of Frank D'Angelo, who again was linked to Sherman. D'Angelo, under his executive, when he was the CEO of the brewery, they ran up something like $100 million in debt, and then Sherman's son Jonathan took it over. So there's something going on with Frank D'Angelo, Mike Ritigliano, and the Shermans, and now that he's dead and there's all this strange goings on with the police investigation, I just wonder if Ritigliano is constantly being brought up on criminal charges because he's an honest cop who's getting a bad raw deal, or if he's up to something.
So now what I'm going to do, Jason, is I beg your indulgence, is to go straight slide by slide through this, but to explain why the pressure points have finally been set. We have basically been we in the crowdsource community and others have been laying traps that have long been set, where the Clinton Foundation, it's right down there, the Clinton Foundation faces for the first time, this November 15th, 2018, the burden of putting reports and audits in to an IRS that is no longer controlled by members, by adherents, at least at the senior level, of the Bush, Obama, Clinton mafia. There's a new person at the IRS, there are new US attorneys, there have been investigations opened that publicly known by the IRS and by the FBI and others that have been going on now for months and months and months. And while the pace of some complex financial fraud investigations take a lot longer to advance than, let's say, this needle in the haystack finding of the person down in Florida, or
found him quickly, didn't they?
They did. So, but that's, those crimes are heinous. and then involve physical harm, but so too, in my judgment, has the Clinton Foundation not just hurt people financially, it's hurt people when we find the whole truth, it's hurt them, it's physically hurt a lot of people.
Well, making fake bombs is very dangerous. You could break a nail, you might get a paper cut closing the envelope.
But so there's this real deadline, a hard deadline, the 15th of November 2018. A lot of attention in the media is going to focus through the 6th of November and the 7th on this election, the midterm election. But get set for a rocket ship ride right after that, in my opinion. So if we go here, we've set the slides up this way so that people who pull them down, and Jason's going to be adding 2 audits that are not in the public domain. They're accessible if you know how to find them. They're not readily accessible. Jason has made PDFs, and he's going to add them to the
video description.
To the video description so you can see them. But when you look in, and we can just hit this thing here, this is guidance from the AICPA, the organization that Mr. Hansen chairs. This is the kind of stuff they do. They write things like this: understanding the entity and its environment and assessing the risks of material misstatement. This is a lengthy 43-page document, lots of small print and lots of footnotes and all that kind of stuff, designed to help accountants think through how you recognize fraud. Material misstatement is shorthand for, stop here, consideration of fraud in a financial statement audit. So this is an organization, the AICPA, chaired by Hansen, that has a lot of people spend time and write a lot of text thinking through how and why an audit team should think carefully about fraud as they're trying to perform their responsibilities, either doing audit work and or doing tax work. So it's not like, I just sit there and make this crap up. I mean, maybe they're making this crap up, but
I think so.
But actually, some highly professional, skilled people who have the bruises and the scars of having been involved with fraud. I mean, fraud is never going to go away. People are always going to try it.
It's very popular.
It's especially in certain countries I can name, but sadly in the United States, in certain states, where there might be a presidential archive, seem to have no problem with it. But this is the type of document that should provide a signpost, pathway, for the BKD audit teams to have been thinking about the work that has been done under their name and their predecessor firm name from 1998 right the way through to 2015. Did anybody at BKD, including Hansen, have they ever read this piece of paper? I mean, because it probably would be a pretty good thing to do, to consider doing it. Before you agree to take on an audit assignment, you better make sure that people on the team who are positions of responsibility are thinking hard about whether there are large risks of fraud in an operation, let's just say, was supposed to be based in Little Rock, Arkansas, has no authority to operate outside Little Rock, Arkansas, but instead has been operating in the Congo, in Papua New Guinea, all over the world, from offices that are not declared, with financial statements that make no sense and don't add up, you should start, a few alarm bells should start to go off and say, you know what, maybe I ought to check, maybe we wrote something about this fraud stuff, maybe we should go back and see whether this is something that deserves close attention. So if you go back into the slide for a sec, these are just some key points to make. You're supposed to assess the risk of fraud. We call it material misstatement. You're supposed to think, the team is supposed to always be thinking, the fact that there's only one bank account here in Little Rock, and there are all these offices around the world in foreign countries where they're not cashless societies. You can't go to Haiti and,
Digicel.
Well, you still have to get, you have to control your foreign operations from a U.S. base. That means you have to have solid records of how you're taking your cash from the U.S. there. Not a great idea to get on a boat or a plane, or even a private plane, with $10 million of cash and go to Haiti and say, well, we'll keep good records. Don't you worry about, you got to open bank accounts. If you open international bank accounts and have large balances, you're supposed to declare them, and you should have professional skepticism. So when did each of these Clinton supposed charities that BKD has been audited in all these countries around the world, did they do these audits themselves? Did they use Praxity after 2008 to help them figure this stuff out? Did they do any checking? But when did each Clinton charity obtain the tax exemption that is required to function as a tax-exempt entity in every U.S. state and every foreign location? A big question here that BKD apparently doesn't seem to care about is who valued the donation that the Clinton Foundation claims it made to the National Archives. If you and I got together and we wanted to give, let's just make up a hypothetical, you wanted to give 10% of some company you owned to the National Archives, you can't say, I'm a pre-billionaire. I've got these ideas, and my ideas are very valuable. Like you're seeing these guys at TV talk about this.
We're all pre-billionaires.
Right, so I've got this company that I'm a pre-billionaire, and so I've fairly valued my 10% interest in my pre-billionaire operation as being worth $75 million. So I'm going to take a $75 million deduction against my personal income taxes because I'm giving you a 10% interest in my pre-billionaire company. You can't do that, And similarly, you can't say that, well, we'll just say we spent $165 million on this Clinton Foundation. We're not going to tell you the truth about what we really spent. We're not going to tell you, how much of this we're still going to use as a massage parlor and penthouse apartment, romantic scheme for one or more members of the Clinton family. I'm not going to tell you any of that. We're just going to say that the value of what we gave to the National Archives is $36 million. And you're going to say, okay, BKD is going to say, what? Yeah, that sounds good to me. 36 million, it adds up to 9, divisible by 3 and 12. Great.
36 million, oh.
Yeah, 36 million, that's the value of our donation. That's the ticket. No independent firm has gone in and valued this, as far as I could see.
Who was that 36 million from and to?
The Clinton Foundation claims on their 2004 tax return, or informational return, that the value of the donation that they gave, of the interest, it's really a license for the National Archives to operate the Presidential Records Facility, is worth $36 million on November 18th, 2004. But as we've said before in the past, they claim on their tax return that that was a cash gift. They gave a check or a wire. It wasn't a cash, it was a non-cash gift. And so BKD, for that crucial year, that's a crucial moment when the donation supposedly was made. The archives were not finished. There was no certificate of permanent occupancy at that point. There's no independent firm has issued a report that I've seen that's credible, a truly independent firm, taking a look and said, yeah, 36 million, that's the right number. It's not 32,425,068 cents.
Right.
It's not it's not 50 million, it's not 2 million. Where's the basis for saying it's 36 million?
Yeah.
Is it like, we
No
get
records
to,
at
let's
all?
go to the local beer outlet and we'll, however many beers we can have as a group, we had 36 beers, 36 million. That sounds good to me. I mean, there's no benefit, there's no justification for it. And this is of crucial importance. The auditing firm and the trustees should have at that moment in time said, how good were our records? Did we check any of this stuff? And then there's a very complex thing. Remember, I've said in the past that this isn't the Gates Foundation. This is a public charity, which means you have to make sure that it in fact is publicly supported. To do that, it's a complex tax calculation that BKD should have checked. Okay? One of the crucial elements of it is what's the aggregate amount of donations by governments to the Clinton Foundation? And of course, to do that work from 1997, they say, well, we're not going to file a tax return. F that, we don't do that. But for 1998 to 2007, we're not going to put any information in about how much money governments gave. We're just going to leave all that stuff out so that it's impossible to check whether it was publicly supported or not. And it's very important. If it's publicly supported, then a donor, an individual donor, can take a higher tax deduction on the gift than if it's a private foundation. So it's not an academic issue whether it's publicly supported. So go to the next page, please. All right, there are a few things that you need to do beyond just filling out the federal tax form. One of them, and we don't need to pull this up here, But one of them is, well, actually, maybe why don't we do that? That's fun. Let's pull up this first link here, and let's do a thought experiment, okay? Now, if you want to operate in New York, not only do you have to register as a charity, and we've showed you the links for that, but you also have to create an entity. So, Jason, if you hit this and turn it into all.
3 types? Oh, no, this?
Yeah, status, hit, yeah, all. And now, for fun, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, just punch that in, please. Clinton Health Access. Let's see, have they ever registered with the New York Secretary of State as a corporation? Well, you have to punch in 14373 to the CAPTCHA, 14373. And then Clinton Health Access Initiative up there. Yeah. Okay, and hit active only and turn that into all. Okay, what happens when we hit search the database down here? No business entities were found for Clinton Health Access Initiative. Okay, so that means it's never registered in New York. Now, they're regularly involved in New York, operating from both the Clinton Foundation office and from when they used to be up in Harlem, the Harlem office. The Clinton Health Access Initiative is regularly transacting and claiming credit for business with a raft of entities here in New York City, and they've never registered. Let's check another one for the fun of it. Let's check, we can check Alliance for a Healthier Generation. Let's see if they've done that, which is operated from New York City. We hit search the database. Okay, and here it tells you, yeah, they registered. Let's hit that thing. When did they register? Oh, they registered on September 16th, 2010. So, Alliance for a Healthier Generation was formed on the 22nd of February, 2010. So how did they function in New York from February 22nd, 2010 forward? And more to the point, we did a whole show about this recently. How in the hell did Alliance for a Healthier Generation operate in New York when it didn't exist as a corporation?
What does it say that it's a foreign not-for-profit?
It means it's not a New York corporation. It's an Arkansas corporation that has to do business inside. Now, forget about the charity side of it. Just to be a corporation, not a proprietorship, not to be an organization. It has to function as a corporation, a not-for-profit corporation. And they didn't register in New York, this one, until September 16th, 2010. Now let's check another one that's fun.
Why does it say it's in Oregon?
Their nominal address is in Oregon, but I'm not sure how many of the employees are actually there. And this gives you the filing history. So if we go do a new search, let's look at the Clinton Foundation itself, which you just try Clinton Foundation and 11830. And we search the database. Nothing for the Clinton Foundation. Let's try the William J. Clinton Foundation.
Well, but that would show up.
Sometimes, yeah, you're going to have to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
All right, so we can go through an exercise like this, and what you're going to see, those of you in the crowd who want to check this out, you're going to see that this thing fails important tests as having been lawfully organized inside New York State. It's not enough just to, do all your...
First test being, is it?
Yeah, right. The is it test. So if we go back into the slide, you can't just be back in the presidential massage parlor penthouse saying, we'll just do everything here in Arkansas and we'll grab fictitious names, doing business as names. If you want to operate as this Clinton Foundation has operated across the United States and around the world, in every single jurisdiction where it's important to register as a foreign corporation, you've got to do that. And then you've got to file your reports, and then you've got to get beyond that. You've got to be aware that there's stiff penalties. Here we look, in California has also, the high tax states like California and others, and New York have onerous rules that carry with them stiff penalties when you violate them. And we look here, let's do another thought experiment. Let's put in organization name. Let's, actually you could put in the FEIN, it's the fastest way. 31158, you don't need the dash, 311580204. And you hit search lower left. And what does it say about the registration status of the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation?
Delinquent.
Delinquent is
Like
not
Bill.
good. That's
Bill Clinton himself,
that's
he's
not
a
good.
delinquent.
And the same is true for the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And these are two states where they've gotten the paperwork wrong and where they're soliciting. These are two states where a lot of people who have a lot of money operate and have given money to these Clinton foundations. Now, this is a link to a useful digest that you can use to start and check what are the requirements to get an audit, a financial audit across the United States. And it gives you all the information. It gives you the statute, it gives you, you know, click on it, you can get to it for the different states if you want it. Most states do require you to have an audit when you get at 500,000 of revenue to $1 million or more. Most of them require it. And the Clinton Foundation has, except for 1997, because we don't know yet what they did in 1997, because they refused to file a required tax form for that, in every year thereafter, they needed to get an audit. And if we go back to the slide, here we have, you know, there seems to be some question in the minds, I guess, of BKD and others, whether Arkansas law requires you to provide an audit. Here is the relevant Arkansas law. It says, each corporation shall keep, what does it say there, Jason, in red? Each corporation shall keep what kind of books?
Properly recorded according to accepted accounting practices.
And it starts by saying it shall keep correct and complete books, not on the back of an envelope, you know, on the some chewing tobacco receipt, you know, maybe I'll put some of my revenue and some of my costs. No, correct and complete books and records. And then it says here, an audit report of a certified public accountant, meaning you can't just take Charles Ortel because he knows something about charity and I write you something, the Charles Ortel and Company or Gary McGee and Company or
Yee
McGee, or for that matter, BKD LLP before it is actually registered as a corporation or a partnership that is certified in Arkansas. You've got to get pieces of paper from real CPAs, even under Arkansas law, which is not tough.
It's
Okay?
sort of amazing that they even have to write this. I mean, this to me is very reminiscent of a sign on the train that says, "Don't get off while the train is moving." It's like, frankly, if you need that sign, go right ahead and get off.
Right. Well, so we contrast, and I'm not, you know, it makes sense that New York law would be better developed than Arkansas law because New York is a bigger state. It's
Been around longer.
Lots of charities in New York, not so many in Arkansas. But in New York law, which is always getting updated or seems to always be getting updated and toughened, here under New York law, they say the annual financial report shall be accompanied by an annual financial statement, which includes, note this doesn't say independent certified. Here we say in New York, an independent certified public accountant's audit report. What does that mean? Example might be, if you've got, say, the city of Little Rock, which chooses as its auditor notorious BKD, and the city of Little Rock enters into a lease with the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, which is supposed to be a public charity, probably not the strongest move in the world as the trustees of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation to use notorious BKD as your auditor, which they did do. And there are other examples of this conflict. So the first question about BKD's role providing any type of audit or tax services to this William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation is, are there other clients more important than the Clinton Foundation? Maybe they are. And then note that they call for an opinion that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, and this is the killer language that's not in Arkansas, and in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, including compliance with, it doesn't say some pronouncements, it says all pronouncements of the Financial Accounting Standards Board and what? The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, chaired by Eric Hansen. So under New York law, the New York people have been defrauded before, and they say, we're not going to accept this, waste paper audit from notorious BAD. We want a firm that's actually, going to comply with the Financial Accounting Standards Board and AICPA guidelines. So New York law is tougher. Many other laws, or state laws and foreign laws, are tougher than Arkansas law. And again, if this were just going to be an Arkansas charity that didn't set foot outside Arkansas, maybe behaving the way BKD and the charity have behaved would be okay, but that's not what they decided to do. And then in this one here, this is a good thing to hit. This is, again, pronouncement from the AICPA explaining that if you file a return that is not complete, you run the risk of the IRS going back to you and saying, and this is interesting, it's from the AICPA, and notice what's wrong with the title. The trouble with filing "and" incomplete, It should say "and" incomplete.
Man, that's really bad for accountants, and they wrote this on September 11th. Maybe they were nervous.
Thinking about other things, rushing out to the remembrance party or something like that. But the point here is that when you file these forms, which the Clinton Foundation is fixing to do, as they say down south, by November 15th, 2018, you got to make sure that every schedule that's required is included. And I could tell you categorically that is not the case for the Clinton Foundation. There isn't a single year where the Clinton Foundation tax forms are complete and truthful. Not one in history. So if we go to the next page in the slide.
Well, at least we're consistent, Charles.
So here, this is, I'll be quick on this, and again, this is for people who don't know much about accounting. It's not like when you fill out these, you get an audit from a BKD or a firm that's going to actually do the work properly. It's not like you have wide latitude to just throw anything down on the page you want. I'm not going to talk about programs. I'm going to talk about initiatives. That sounds better. Initiative, not program. No, you got to lay out the exact categories of expenses in financial statements that are defined. For this Accounting Guidance 117 lays out the specific way in which financial statements, a very lengthy document, that financial statements have to be laid out. And importantly, you have over here the income statement, and you have over here the balance sheet. Income statement tells you, how much revenue you had, how much expenses you had, and what's the difference. It would be called in business profit or loss. For charities, it's called change in net assets. So the change in net assets that a charity puts on the board in a year or an accounting period, you look at that, looking at the revenues and the expenses, and then you also do an on the day estimate of what was your net worth beginning of the year, December 31st, and this for 17, December 31st, 2016. What was my net worth? What was the value of my assets, my liabilities? What are my net assets? And then at the end of the year, you do a similar exercise. What's the value of my net assets? And you measure the change in your net assets from two different perspectives. And those changes must equal one another. You cannot have a scenario where your change in your income statement and net assets is different than your change in your balance sheet. If you have a difference of $1 or a penny, there's a problem. You haven't done something right. And so I can tell you in the Clinton Foundation for the period December 31st, 2009 forward, none of that works, okay? And it's the kind of stuff where, just somebody like me who likes to think about investing, you spot that stuff quickly. It doesn't take you long to check that, and there should never be an error. I was involved when I worked for another firm. We were looking at a series of investments, and I happened to notice that the balance sheet was off on a $100 million balance sheet. It was off by $26.
Oh.
And I'm like, what the hell? It shouldn't be off by $26. And it turned out in that case, it was fraud.
Oh, wow.
But
they were being at least careful to try to make it not super obvious. They were only off by $26 out of millions.
Right. And then the other thing, it says the statement of activities, that's the income statement, provided by a not-for-profit corporation shall focus on the organization as a whole. In other words, you can't, if you're the Clinton Foundation, you can't say, well, actually, the Clinton Foundation is the thing in Little Rock, but this year we're not going to count the 26 offices that we have around the world because that's where we stole a whole bunch of money. We don't want you to know about that. When you talk about an audit and a serious audit being done by an accounting firm, It's got to look at the whole organization, and the CEO and CFO, Chief Executive Officer and Chief Financial Officer of the organization have to represent typically to the auditor, you are seeing everything in our organization. Our organization consists of these 35 subsidiaries in these 22 countries and this and that. You lay all that stuff out for the auditor should check it.
I think they were only counting the divisions that included IMAX films about dinosaurs.
Right. And then it's very important that you decide what your programs are. For a charity, the most important expense is the programs, i.e. what you were approved to do.
Right.
So a reasonable question for BKD to be asking, or any auditor, or now Price Waterhouse or Cohn-Resnick, or whoever else is auditing them.
What are you approved to do?
Yeah, what can you do, buddy? And you look, and we're going to show you, you can't do anything outside Little Rock, the way I read it. And so that's suddenly these travel expenses and hotel expenses and all this international work. I mean, how are you doing this as a charity if you don't have the legal authority to do it? And it's like, shut up, idiot. Hillary's going to be president. So, and here you see an actual definition of program services. This is important because we're going to show you numbers that are so obviously wrong in a second. Program services are the activities that result in goods and services being distributed to beneficiaries, customers, or members that what, Jason? That fulfill the purposes or mission for which the organization exists. That fulfill the purposes or mission for which the organization exists.
I mean,
Okay?
it's basically just saying program services are doing what it is that your charity is intended to do.
Allowed to do, yeah. So you can't say, I've got a presidential charity, and now I'm going to create this Health Matters initiative run by Jackie Chan's nephew. You know, you can't do that.
The guy didn't even look Chinese. I wonder how he got that.
These days, that doesn't matter. Rachel
Maybe he's
Dolezal,
adopted or
Elizabeth
something.
Warren, remember all that. So this, just in case people are wondering about this, this standard went into effect December 15, 1994. So before the Clinton Foundation took off in the early years, and the standards change and get modified, but for a long period of time here, this standard did apply to the Clinton Foundation. And even, you know, the dopey people at BKD on the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation and related accounts, even they should be able to figure out, you know, when standards bit and how they applied to their notional client. So if we go to the next page.
Even a cartoon tiger could figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. So then the question becomes, are the are donations that are made to the Clinton Foundation, you know, can you just put a little donate button on a website and then have money come into you and you could just do with it as you wish, or are there restrictions that apply? And the first set of restrictions applies to what are you legally authorized to do. Here is, we don't need to hit these links, Jason, because we've done it before. This is the application, the determination letter that came from the IRS, and the application that the Clinton Foundation submitted to the IRS asking for authority to be a charity, a specific type of charity based in Little Rock, Presidential Archive, Research Center, that's it. A lot of detail in there, okay? This is the text of the determination letter saying, you know, assuming your operations will be stated as stated in your application for recognition of exemption. It doesn't say, because you're a great former, you know, Bubba, you could do whatever the hell you want. It says, assuming your operations will be as stated in your application, which we have for you to consider right here. We're giving you, you're exempt from federal income tax, but we're deeming you to be a publicly supported organization described in Section 509A1 and, not or, and 170B1A Roman 6. So that's a specific type of organization. It is not, you know, focusing on lessening the burdens of global interdependence. No, it's supposed to be an entity, an organization, properly organized and operated in Little Rock, housing the presidential records and allowing scholars to study those records. That's it, okay? Then it says, if you change your sources of support, your purposes, note they say your character or your method of operation, please let us know so we can consider the effect of the change on your exempt status. Then they say, if you amend your organizational document or bylaws, please send a copy of the amended document or bylaws. Also let us know all changes in your name or address. And of course the Clinton approach is, F that, we're not doing any of that. Okay, we're gonna change like crazy, we're gonna, you know, hide these changes from you. we'll eventually get around to giving, after Hillary loses, we'll give you some of the damaging information while we try to make sure that we get rid of Donald Trump so she doesn't get punished. We don't get punished. I mean, that's not what this says. And mind you, this is just a letter from the IRS back to the Clinton Foundation.
Oh.
It's a standard letter, but it's not like that's all that matters. You got to check the regulations, you got to check the statute, and it's crystal clear that this is the way it works. As we said before, it's not like you go to the IRS and say, I need a driver's license. And they say to you, okay, can you park a car? Yeah, I can park a car. And then you can take your car all over the world. That's not what a charity is all about. You go and you say, I want to get a license to operate a specific type of charity that's going to house all of the presidential records of Bill Clinton's presidency and allow scholars to visit Little Rock and study that. That's
From reading this, Charles, I think you could interpret that perhaps Bill Clinton was unclear because it doesn't delve into changes with what you can do to people against their will.
That's true.
Which is, it's changing rapidly.
And the other thing here is that you have this issue of when you take money in that's a donor might give to the Clinton Foundation for the purposes, setting up the Little Rock. A donor might say, I want to give you money for the endowment, for a permanent endowment to make sure that there are resources, that,
Donor can choose that?
Absolutely, a donor can, if the foundation is set up to have an endowment.
Why does the donor care what their money is used for?
It's a standard thing when you're giving money to, let's say, a university. The toughest money to get for universities is money that's unrestricted. So, people say you're getting tuition, you're getting government grants.
Or they say use this money for the cancer research.
Exactly. Or
don't do whatever you want with it. I want my money to do X.
Right. The Goodman Animation Facility or whatever.
Right.
Or Goodman Professorship of whatever.
Animated.
So it's not an academic thing here whether the money was given for restricted or unrestricted purposes. And I would take the position, which I hope somebody seriously is looking at this, that all of the money that was sent towards the Clinton Foundation was certainly restricted, in one sense, to being used to support the Presidential Archive and the Research Center. No money was available for the Clinton Foundation to fight HIV/AIDS.
Well, because that's all they told anybody they were going to do.
Anybody that's most important being the IRS. They sought and received federal income tax exemption because they claimed they had a specific purpose, not a general purpose. You can't get federal tax exemption for a charity to do, I think I'll do something.
Restaurants.
Whatever. You can't, that's not the way it works. So with that in mind, if we go to the next page, we get to see how well they did. All right, this is their record of BKD's shameful record of involvement with the Clinton Foundation through the year end, December 31st, 2008. We start here in 1997. They were supposed to file a short period income tax return or tax return for October 23rd, 97 through year end. They didn't do it. So therefore, it wasn't accurate. They should have maybe had to have an audit. We don't yet know how much money actually went towards the Clinton Foundation in 97. I have a suspicion that it was all the money that came from the second inaugural committee, which was the biggest donor, 2.3 million, I believe, from memory in 98. I think that money was committed to the Clinton Foundation, maybe more in 97.
So wait a minute, Bill Clinton's inaugural committee donated money to the Clinton Foundation? Why?
Well, the way this works is, in theory, you have Trump just had an inaugural committee, but you're supposed to file a report 90 days after the inauguration of all the money that came in and all the money that went out. And why? This is an ancient concern in America, way back when people were concerned that newly elected presidents would be easily purchased by corrupt people. So there's a special rule that when you have the party to celebrate this inaugural, you have to make a public report on who gave the money and how the money was spent. And it's very detailed. It's not like, you can't say 3 million. It's got to be.
So why would a committee to make an inauguration party for Bill Clinton donate money to the foundation?
Because they would assume, charitably now, or not putting the worst light on it, they would be thinking, these are supporters of the president. Another thing the supporters of the president might want to do is to have a facility. Facilities are expensive. We raise more money than we need. Let's just put it into this facility. It makes sense, but the tougher question for me is, how much money really went to the second inaugural
Right.
committee, and how do we know that? How do we not know that perhaps 15 million was skived off and spread around out of the
Johnny
second
Tree.
inaugural committee to intimidate Kathleen Willey and intimidate Juanita Broderick and Monica Lewinsky and pay for lawyers and all that kind of stuff? How do we know this money wasn't yet another slush fund? And we tried to get the report, a number of us, and we were denied.
The inaugural committee report.
Right. That's something that President Trump's people should be able to see, unless, of course, it was BleachBit.
Well, but it just screams of being one of these areas where if it says 5 million paid to the catering service for the
Right.
inauguration party, how many of those caterers went and shot Kathleen Willey's dog?
Right. Exactly. This is something that needs to be far more carefully studied. So for 98 and 99, or 90 and 98, sorry, in 97, 98 and 99, the application to get federal tax exemption for the Presidential Foundation said that there were no other related party entities where trustees were involved. And that's just false. At the time the application went in, December 23rd, 1997, David Pryor had, I think, been, I believe by February of 98, he became chairman of the second legal expense trust fund to try to pay off the legal bills. In the 98-99 time frame, 98 rather, two people on the second inaugural committee, Terry McAuliffe
No.
and Ann Jordan, were the co-chairs of the second inaugural committee. So there should have been a lot more disclosure about these related parts. The fact that the second inaugural committee made such a big donation, by far the biggest donation in theory in 98. There were only 3 donations. The biggest one, 70% of it, the money declared, came from the second inaugural committee. Meanwhile, the second legal expense trust was being run by the other, another independent director. And then in 99 and 2000, of course, what was going on? Hillary Clinton was running for Senate. So, there's no disclosure here about entities connected to the Clinton family that may have been engaged in prohibited political activities that could have benefited from the operation of this unsupervised, unaudited mess that BKD decided to hitch its flaming wagon of you-know-what to.
What happened to Johnny Tree? Was that the guy's name?
Charlie Tree.
Charlie Tree, the Chinagate guy.
Right, yes. Yeah, so the second legal expense trust was set up because the first one with Charlie Tree and the other, a number of other people, basically the first legal expense trust, it appears, may have been taking money from foreigners to pay sitting president's and his wife's legal expenses, which is strictly prohibited by law. So all sorts of problems here. In 98 through 2008, these IRS returns were filed. Okay, none of them were accurate. In certain years, they were filed, multiple versions were filed, but none of them were accurate. There's no financial audit from BKD that we found yet for 98, 99. There may be one. It would have to be compliant. It wasn't compliant. Then we found an audit for 2001 that covers 2000. So that's why we say, yes, there's an audit from all these years. Are any of them compliant? None of them are compliant. And we're going to spend a little bit of extra time today going into this, but some of the things that should have been disclosed in the audits and in the 990s are Bill Clinton's involvement with the American India Foundation, the International AIDS Trust in 2001 that are not disclosed. His involvement with those two, and with his MindSpirit LLC, which was a conduit used to pay travel expenses for the entire Clinton family and to pay Bill Clinton money, millions.
They're super into stealing money from travel, huh?
Yeah, so one way to
I mean,
roll.
there's got to be something to that. There's got to be something that makes that difficult to track,
Sure.
easier to do.
Sure. I mean, when you have particularly international travel, and when you start having friends who are willing to give you a free plane, the value assigned to that free plane, it's a soft value.
In-kind.
And in-kind contributions, or there's
Currency exchange rates.
right, and how you actually value the use of a plane. I mean, no private plane is in the air 365 days of the year, and so how do you really decide how much it costs to use a private plane that may be heavily used or other. So it's a very delicate scenario. And international travel, of course, involving private planes is very expensive. But large travel expenses, one thing that should have gone off in the BKD mind, the incredibly small mind, I guess, at BKD is, why are they spending millions of dollars on travel? I mean, it's supposed to be doing work in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's tough to spend $1 million traveling around Little Rock, Arkansas.
Gotta get back to the game.
Yeah, exactly. So we just talked here about 2001, 2, 3, and 4 as problems for American Indian International AIDS Trust, because by 2004, International AIDS Trust, I believe, was dissolved, though they pretend it still exists. It might have been 2005 on that one. American India has been a disaster since Bill Clinton got involved with it, in my opinion. It's smaller than the Clinton Foundation. It's only about 100 million total, but it has a raft of problems that we've talked about in the past. We leave that aside in 2005 because we have to bring up problems with Old Chai, this organization created March 24th, 2004, that was illegally organized and operated, and then the Bush-Clinton-Katrina mess. Then by 2006, they're involved with the Hillary Clinton senatorial campaign. I don't think there's been adequate scrutiny on, overlap between donors to the political campaign with donors to the foundation, with failures to control the financials of this presidential foundation. Then we get in 2007, massive expenditures funded principally by the Gates Foundation and Unitaid for illegal HIV/AIDS work. We have Hillary paying for a Senate campaign, then right away having to do a presidential campaign where the first time she failed grievously. Then by 2008, we also have the fact, BKD should have been, maybe they didn't know where Massachusetts was, but they should have probably checked to see whether the people operating the biggest piece by far of the Clinton Foundation in 2008 had been told by Commonwealth of Massachusetts, see ya.
How would the accounting firm, for real, joking aside, that's something like that happens. I mean, you're a company and now the entire state of Massachusetts says you're not allowed to operate in our state. How does the accounting firm not know that?
Well, what they should have done, and in time we'll get the representation letters that BKD may have coaxed out of the Clinton Foundation entities. You would have a letter in the file from 2008, the representation letter, where, let's hope for BKD's sake they have this, that let's call it Bruce Lindsay and maybe our Magaziner have signed a letter, or Andrew Kessel, saying, here's a list of all of our
states we've been kicked out of?
Well, no, I was going to put it slightly differently. Here's a bit of all our entities, and here's where they've operated, here's where they're licensed or approved for fundraising, and then there would be a paragraph where they'd say, we have never been disciplined, we're not involved in any pending or threatened or completed administrative or regulatory matter, we've never had to pay a fine. And typically, you get such a paragraph out of the management, and they'd add the words "except for the 5,000 times where we could," But there should be a letter like that in the file. And on the question, let's not hit these because we're running over on time here. But there's 2 links here where in 2016, an excellent bunch of work was done by the Scripps media people documenting multiple false state regulatory filings. We uncovered separately a consent agreement with their largest fundraising agent, O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson in 2002 in Pennsylvania. These should have been disclosed and would have tripped up all kinds of disclosures, probably would have forced the Clinton Foundation maybe even to close had this stuff been properly disclosed. And now we're just talking about the period 97 to 2008. Along the way, let's hit this one here. This is, all this is online, easy to check if you care. And again, we've got Mr. Hansen here, chairman of the International Institute of CPAs. You want to find out information about a company. You hit Find Company. And let's just see what happens when we hit Start Now. And we then go into William J. Clinton. And up pops the William J. Clinton Foundation UK, dissolved on the 10th of October. Look at the filing history.
Did he also start it for £1?
No. We'll go all the way down here to incorporation, hit the view PDF, okay? And this was set up in London the 10th of July 2007. So Hillary's still got a shot. She's running for president. Go down the page a little bit. And we're going to see the fraudster team at work. Not Mark Richard Lacey, but we keep going.
They're bold, doing this in every country.
Yeah. Here we have, I believe you're going to see in the next page, you might see, not that guy, keep going. All right, we've got, let's see, keep going. Yeah, keep going. Oh, there's Andrew Martin Kessel. Here he's signing this in May 2007 as a director. And here you got Bruce Lindsay. Here you see Bruce. Remember I said how Bruce Lindsay's
sloppy handwriting.
Well, but it's distinctive. It's a big flowery B and flowery L. And later we see examples, might have been because of his stroke, where his signature is very different, causing me to question whether
someone's copying it.
Yeah, or whether whether he really signed it at all. So this is an example of them getting together, creating an entity in the UK. And if we go into the document below, you'll see in a second. Okay, just slowly here. This is the entity, the formal way in which you set up an entity in the UK. And we've taken people through this before. This is riddled with lies. This is claiming to the English here that they're authorized to, see this in their objects, the advancement of health or the saving of lives in general, and also in particular by the alleviation of suffering caused by the pandemic. They have no authority for this in May of 2007, July of 2007. So they're going to the people who don't know better in the UK and saying, well, former president, lawyers, we're going to lie under oath, in another country about what we can do. Yet again, that's how we roll. We lie under oath. And we're going to tell you that we can fight AIDS. Go to the next page. You'll see we can do this health stuff over here. We can relieve poverty. Now, relieving poverty is the same as giving somebody, can be read to just, I'll give somebody a payoff, right?
Money, right.
That's not charity necessarily. And it's bright line law, I'm told, that you cannot set up a U.S. charity that has limited purposes and then go outside the U.S. and say, in the U.S. we can only do this, but in England we can do whatever the hell we want. Yeah. We've got resolution of conflicts, that's something to do with the advancement of environmental protection or improvement. I mean, why didn't they put down run a racetrack? I mean, it's just, this is egregious behavior. And on the part of Andrew Kessel, maybe he's just that dumb that he didn't get what he was doing. But Bruce Lindsay, is a lawyer. He's been around he's in his early 70s.
A lot of dumb lawyers around, apparently.
Yeah, I don't think he's a dumb lawyer. I think he's a crooked lawyer.
Yeah. Oh, well, that might be.
Yeah. So if we go back into the slide here, this is the job they did through year-end 2008.
Good work.
Great. Then we go to the next page.
A little Truman the Tiger.
Yeah, right. So when we talk now about this, understand that the Clinton Foundation has never obtained required IRS approval to do any international work. Okay? This is information that you will not find in the Clinton Foundation website. You will not be able to see this unless you go to the New York State website. And I said to you before, Jason, I said to the viewers that Jason's putting up links to certain information for 2010 and 11 will be on the slide intro site.
Two additional, what are they, audits?
Yeah, I'll explain them in a second. But so here, this is an entity called CHI in 2009. Okay, now remember this CHI supposedly didn't exist according to the IRS tax form when it says, submitted December 31st, 2009. Are you a successor to any previous operations? The Clinton Foundation, new CHI says, yeah, we're not a successor. But if these numbers are to be believed, 175 million out of the 246 million in third-party revenue earned by the Clinton Foundation was earned by CHI, an organization that supposedly didn't exist. That's 71%.
It's pretty effective.
Most significantly, 98% of all the grants from governments, whatever, 98% of the grants went to CHI. And you're going to say to the IRS, December 31st, 2009, this thing we're setting up, Clinton Health Access Initiative, it's not a successor to any other entity. You're going to say that with a straight face. And then of the programs, 94%, remember I said programs are the most important piece of a charity. 94% of the declared program expenses were declared by this CHI thing that didn't exist. And it's one thing to kind of be off by 1%, 0.5%, but to be, this is like just totally wrong. I'm just lie your ass off accounting. And there is no guidance for that. So when you think about the practicalities, let's say they wanted to go on the track of saying, all right, what we're doing here is kind of like Mueller and these investigations. What we're going to do here is we're going to say that the old entity did work, let's say during all of 2009, and the new CHI, which was organized September 29th, 2009, we could say that didn't do anything between September 29th, 2009 and December 31st, 2009. Okay, and then immediately on January 1st, 2010, this new entity, which had nothing to do with the old entity, leaps into the shoes of the old entity. Now, it'd be one thing to do that if we were just, 21st century TV operating from here, from like New York City. But if you've got an entity that in the 2009 year had 175 million of third-party revenue. That's 15 million a month. All right,
good.
And is operating, let's say, 30 countries. It's not a trivial exercise to let the old thing operate in 2009 and have a new thing leap into existence around the world on January 1st when everyone's still hungover. It's practically speaking impossible to even think about doing that. And all kinds of tax forms should have been filed explaining how the Clinton Foundation liquidated this old CHI. There's a special form, Schedule, I think, N from memory, never submitted. Okay, so when you liquidate an existing operation, there's especially one operating around the world, with exchange rates doing this, there's all sorts of potential for scamming money out of the old estate.
You've just said something really interesting, $15 million a month. What is the most successful charity in terms of getting the most money? Because that sounds like a huge amount.
It would make it's one of the bigger charities in America. I don't know specifically the answer to your question. If you take out the endowed educational institutions, very big, and hospital systems, it would definitely be in the top 100.
I wonder what the most successful charity is.
Yeah. I'll tell you one entity it isn't. Not the Clinton Foundation.
Well, I mean, 15 million a month sounds like a huge amount of charitable contributions.
So we've covered some of these first 3 points here, but the bank account disclosures that should have been submitted to the Department of Treasury by June 30th, 2009 for 2008, and by June 30th, 2010 for 2009, they should tell the IRS a tremendous amount. And I don't have the ability to look at those statements, but I certainly hope, if the IRS has not already gotten all of those bank statements going back to time immemorial on the Clinton Foundation, we'll know the IRS is not interested in doing this thing properly.
I think we know that already.
And we've been through numerous shows that, of these $159.7 million worth of grants that CHI says it got, you could cross-check and look at the Gates Foundation and say, well, Gates said they sent this. Does that foot with the Clinton Foundation? And we've already established that that doesn't foot. There should be no differences, right? If you're using the same method of accounting, which Gates and the Clinton Foundation were using, accrual, there should be no differences. Okay, but there are meaningful differences with Unitaid, with the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, with governments. And now we're simply in 2009. Go to the next page. We have a balance sheet. Again, this information is not available through the Clinton Foundation website because they don't want you to see it, right? But we found it. And we have this, remember I said old CHI, they say on that date, the 31st December 2009, they tell the IRS, we are not a successor to any other organization. Yet, in the hidden combined accounting statements, this is the total amount. 89 million of assets in this thing that didn't exist. 74 million in third-party liabilities, an intercompany loan of 4 million, and equity of 14.6 million. And last I checked, $14.6 to $18.6 million is real money. right? You don't say to the IRS on your form seeking tax exemption, unless you got Lois Lerner in it, and her team just saying, rules don't apply to you, that you have nothing here. And you look at the percentages of the cash, the total cash, 84 million out of 117 million related to this old chai, 72%.
Wow.
Right? And to your point about imaginary liabilities, we don't know if these accounts payable and this deferred revenue are correct numbers. We don't know if those liabilities really existed. They could be asserting that they have those liabilities. Those liabilities may have been higher than that. We just simply don't know because why? They used notorious BAD. And this is to a point now where, in my opinion, tough questions need to be asked of BKD, of current management, maybe replacement management, partners need to ask the question, why did this mess go on for so long? And why did BKD issue an audit for this new chai that was created September 29th, 2009, that claimed in the audit that there were no assets or liabilities of new chai on January 1st or December 31st, 2009. You see the none, 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 none. That's in yet another audit document. So you would look at this, there should not be these gigantic discrepancies. There shouldn't be any discrepancies, frankly, from a properly audited set of accounts. This is really an F, lower than an F, whatever that is.
F minus.
Yeah. So we go to the next page. Same old stuff in 2010. Again, the documents that Jason has put up on the website, or you will put up.
Right after, yeah.
Okay, we have an audit for 2010 that was obtained through New York State, and it shows information that's not on the Clinton Foundation website version. Again, this new chai at this point is 55% of the supposed consolidated results, and 69% of programs relate to this new chai. Yet in 2010, the Clinton Foundation had no authority to control new chai. It had no authority to do any international work. And I would argue new chai's tax exemption was obtained under false pretenses. And it should be revoked retroactively. Yeah, exactly. And in the same moment in 2010, we've had separate shows on this. It wasn't enough for them just to screw up, new chai. They also illegally created this Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund without disclosing properly their companion operations with something called the Clinton Haiti Fund. They illegally created this new Alliance for a Healthier Generation, new Clinton Global Initiative, and they illegally turned something that didn't exist, the Clinton Climate Operation, into something called C40. So it wasn't as if they were specializing in doing charitable work that was all properly documented. Substantially everything they were doing was not authorized, was not validly organized. And, yet BKD said, you know what, we're going to give you an audit. We're going to stick by the audit, because that's what we do. If we go to the next page, here we have the results for 2011. Now there's a special kind of audit. It's called, from memory, it's A133. It's a tighter type of audit that you get, that the federal government asks you to get, if governments give you more than a certain amount of money, a modest amount of money. In 2011, allies of ours found this A133 audit, which is linked, and it's, I think, all in with the exhibits. It's like 90 pages long, much more specific than even the one that you'll see for 2010 or the one that I used in 2009. And this shows you that, once again, this new chai is 2/3 of the consolidated revenue, 94% of all the programs, and it's clearly a very meaningful piece of this mess is international work that is not authorized by the IRS and is not validly tax exempt. But once again, this BKD firm, they'll give them an audit for the parent foundation, they give them an A133 audit, they give them a chai audit, because that's what they do. They roll with crappy audits, thinking they're never going to get caught. Why? Because they have the chairman of the AICPA on I guess, on notice not to make an issue about this, which is why his colleagues at the AICPA need to put Mr. Hansen over here in a box and say, on this one, you can't even know what we're going to do about this. Similarly, at BKD, there needs to be an independent team looking at this mess and trying to save what can be saved to BKD by November 15th, 2018.
They better hurry.
Well, because BKD, if they don't know by now that they have a very serious set of problems, that they need to rescind all of their past work, and that they need to give another auditing firm a chance to protect what's left of this Clinton Foundation, then they know less than nothing.
I've been tweeting these videos at Eric Hansen. I don't know if he's watching. Busy going to the Missouri games.
So the standard here, when we think about this, in the IRS standard, if you have, let's say, a well-run foundation, the Goodman Foundation, and it's supposed to, I don't know, promote animation skills internationally to disadvantaged, I don't know, people, whatever. And let's say for some reason you end up doing an insubstantial amount of work that's not consistent with your program's mission. You're fine with that. And insubstantial has been held to mean less than $1,000, actually over the life of the charity.
Right.
So you certainly cannot be spending taking in $167 million in a year just for this illegal chai thing, and spending another $173 million, $72.7 million on expenses for something that isn't authorized. That clearly is more than insubstantial. $1,000 would be more than insubstantial. So this is a bright line, in my view, violation. If we go to the final page, okay, this is an interesting slide to a number person like me.
Sorry, Charles. Kevin says 750,000 is the threshold for the A133 audit.
Oh, okay, very good. So they should have had one of them in many, many years. And we only have
every year, basically.
pretty much, and we don't have those. So why didn't BKD decide, or why didn't, in the years where BKD was the in quotes, named auditor, which would be for tax services and or auditing services, 98 through 2012, why aren't there any A133 audits? But this is a slightly different set of points. Here what we've done is we've said, remember I said, you take the net assets on the balance sheet and you divide them into unrestricted, invested in fixed assets, which I would argue these are not unrestricted, but they claim in their presentation that the Little Rock complex, in essence, is unrestricted. I think it's restricted. Then the temporarily restricted, 54.9 million. Then the permanently restricted, that's supposed to be for a speaker's endowment. So as of the year end 2012, according to BKD, at the end of their work, they said to the follow-on accountants, okay, here's a $211 million pile of you-know-what that stinks. And that's what we're going to tell you. That's all the work we've done. That's your starting place. You have 211.4 million stinking piles of something that really isn't an organization, is not authorized. There should be all sorts of warning signals about it. We're not on the job anymore because we've done we don't like stinking piles of 211 million problems. So we're out. Peace out, man. So you bring in Price Waterhouse, and they then, at the end of 2013, they say, well, actually that stinking pile has gone from 211 to 283. But now Price Waterhouse puts its name and reputation on this audit, relying on years and years of work being correct for BKD. So in other words, 85% of the unrestricted assets, you could argue, that PwC claims exist at year-end 2013 is this 46 million that BKD is blessed. So BKD is 85% responsible for that, 100% responsible for fixed assets, 95%. The number that moves in all of this is this permanently restricted thing. Goes from 250,000 up to 183, 182 million.
That's crazy.
Well, and it's particularly crazy because our previous show, we had a long discussion about why they weren't allowed to do this in the first place. They weren't allowed to go and raise money for an endowment that would let them do whatever the hell they wanted to do. You can't do that. You can raise an endowment to further your authorized purposes, but their authorized purposes are not doing whatever the hell they wanted to do. And beyond that, they had previously taken money, more than $250,000. We've done shows on this in the past. The Wedge Foundation in Houston had given them approximately $1 million that was supposed to go into an endowment. That was money coming from the Deputy Prime Minister of Lebanon. So arguably that should have been disclosed as a government, maybe as a government grant. And then they've taken more than $3 million from memory, $3.75 million from the Roy and Christine Sturgis Foundation for a permanent endowment. And there are other donations that had been made for an endowment, so they should be showing more than $250,000 as permanently restricted funds in an endowment. And it's bad enough to take money from donors and then go off and do things you're not supposed to do, but you get in massive trouble when you take money for an endowment and you use it for another purpose. That's called a diversion.
Yeah, apparently not, though. They haven't gotten into any trouble.
Well, because they've managed to make sure that in the states where the laws are really serious, New York and California, against diversions, and other states, but just picking New York and California, they've made sure that it's a democratic machine.
The Attorney General.
And the governor.
Yeah. Our commenters are saying that in 2011, Chai got $2.2 million from the U.S. government. Why is that?
Yeah, it's crazy. Because Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. So this has gone on a little bit longer than normal, just because there was a lot to cover. But a headline message, and we wanted to do this slightly differently than some of the recent broadcasts, is that attorneys general in multiple states, Arkansas, New York, California, and Forrest Gump's uncle, need to get together and immediately, forthwith, appoint a conservator for all of these Clinton Foundation entities. If you don't do that, this is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more of a mess. And there comes a moment in time where you can't. The regulators get tagged with the problems as well. So we can't let this Clinton Foundation example stand uninvestigated and unprosecuted. If it is uninvestigated and unprosecuted, all that will mean is that other scoundrels, other dynastic political families think Obama, Bush, and others, maybe Elizabeth Warren's family, will look at this and say, Jesus, the Clintons, they were bankrupt when he was president. They had all these legal bills, and now they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Chelsea's set up to do this, with Mark the rest of her life, and then with her kids. This is a great scam.
Yeah.
We can't let this scam example continue. We can't let Eric Hansen off the hook. Those of you who are watching this who think that Eric Hansen and AICPA ought to get a copy of this video, please send, not just this video, send the Man for All Seasons one where we introduce the topic hoping they do the right thing. And if you got the time and the inclination, send every damn video that we've done, all 115 videos, direct to Eric Hansen CPA. That's a different guy, I think. It's Eric Hansen CPA is his handle. Yeah, that's him.
Well, I suspect he's not going to watch it, but it's worth sending it to him anyway. Maybe he'll like the little video of him and Truman the Tiger.
He says a committed lifelong learner.
Well, we don't want people to harass him, but we definitely want answers from public figures. I mean, where is the line drawn, Charles, if we pointed out to people that they should be writing to congressional representatives? I mean, this guy's the head of the certified
AICPA,
Yeah.
No, I have long felt, and I remember I got on the phone with top people at CNN in their investigative unit, and they were taking me through. I had several lead-up calls, and then I was on with the top people, and I took them through 45 minutes, an hour of, back in 2016, I think it was, why I was so concerned about this. And the top guy said, well, you're very animated. You're talking in a loud voice about this, and you've got a lot to say about this. So, is there something wrong with you? I said, no, there's nothing wrong with me, but there's a lot wrong with the Clinton Foundation, and there's a lot wrong with the regulators who aren't getting off their asses and doing what needs to be done to make an example of these fraudsters.
Well, it looks like the AICPA is basically just handing out awards to other people at BKD. So how do we know the AICPA is anything that can be trusted?
Well, the AICPA is something that historically has been trusted, and it's one of its specialties is good governance practices when it comes to accounting. It is a large membership organization. It might even be, I'll have to check and see if it's a charity.
But when I look at things like the New York Times and the Washington Post, it seems like these reputable organizations are the #1 targets of fraudsters, because if they can take it over,
Yeah.
they co-opt the credibility of that thing. So, I mean, again, it seems impossible for a competent accountant to have missed. I mean, it's not like, oh, whoops, there was a thing here. It's everything about it is totally wrong. How could any accountant, how could a bad accountant have missed it?
So as a guess, the way this kind of stuff works is, the fraud gets bigger and bigger, the fraud gets bigger than the fraudster, and you then start thinking about it purely in political terms, and you say, well, I've got a problem. If so long as Barack Obama is president, I don't have a problem, because I'll reach a deal with him, and perhaps the Clintons believe they had information, dirt on the Obamas. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But maybe there was a deal cut where the Clintons and the Obamas said, all right, we're going to work together, and Hillary, you're going to be president after me. And if you go down that way of thinking, and you ignore these rules, these accounting rules or numbers, who cares about numbers? Those are for nerds. Those are for Republicans. Forget that. I'm just going to be president, and I will bury anybody who challenges me as Hillary.
Literally.
Because that could have happened. And so you got nothing to lose. Let's just play along. And by the way, Eric and BKD and the AICPA and these law firms, Simpson Thacher maybe, yes, you're going to come to us and say we have a problem, and then it'll be like me when was in Indonesia once, and somebody said, you got a problem, because my nanny didn't have a passport with more than 6 months into it, and I didn't know it. This is like 2 days before Christmas. I've got 2 tiny kids in Indonesia, having flown from New York to London to Hong Kong, etc. And the Christmas presents are supposedly at the hotel, and my nanny's going to be in jail. So I said,
Charles Ortel level problems.
yeah, so I'm sitting there going, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm also a little jet lagged and whatever. And they, come see the captain. So I go into the back of the captain, and he said, you've got a problem, but in Indonesia, problems can be handled. And I said to him, well, is this a $50 problem or a $100 problem? He said, it's about a 100-pound problem, British pounds. We could do that. So in she came, and
So that's it for 100 pounds. That works out.
100 pounds in Indonesia in 1993 was, a lot of money back then for them. Yeah, but they could have asked for more. Then I get to the hotel, and I say, where's all this formula that we Federal Expressed from the United States?
Oh, that's another problem.
That was more like $700.
Wow. I had a lot of FedEx problems in Dubai.
Right, same idea there.
Boy, that took a lot of doing. And if I didn't have an Emirati producer, I mean, it was all afternoon. He was in there schmoozing these guys. I don't know how you say schmoozing in Farsi or whatever language they speak over there,
Arabic.
but I'll tell you, that was because what happened was we shipped all the camera stuff, and they were like, oh, look at this bill. That's worth a lot of money.
Exactly. But so with this one, I view that it's our duty, in fact, to make this known, to try to push regulators for a Spike Lee moment, do the right thing here, truly a right thing. And this is an obvious, massive fraud. It's the largest unprosecuted set of frauds in history, I think. And so, no, you're not harassing somebody who runs the AICPA by contacting them and say, hey, how come you run the AICPA and how come you're chief operating officer of BKD and you're letting this work stand for the largest set of unprosecuted frauds in history? Why are you doing this? Why did you let PwC rely on your work? Why did you let Kohn-Resnick let PwC rely on your work? Why don't you stand up and be counted here, Mr. Hansen?
I'm just wondering if people should maybe tweet at Truman the Tiger and ask him how he's allowing these audits to stand. He does have a Twitter.
He does, and that's interesting that he's got more followers, 10 times as many followers
As Eric Hansen?
as Eric Hansen.
Charles, I think we might be onto the next big internet conspiracy theory. Is Eric Hansen, in fact, Truman the Tiger? How would we explain the two of them being seen together in this photograph? I don't know. It's a mystery.
And how is the University of Missouri doing in football this year?
You know what? I have no idea.
Less than no interest in that one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Charles, it's been yet another powerhouse presentation. I think when people feel like you've exhausted all of the evidentiary resources you could possibly have in this matter, you pull out yet another hundreds thick stack of pages of documentation. When is someone going to act on this? I guess we don't know.
Well, we do know that by November 15th, 2018, they have to file, and they have to file in a way that we can access it. So we're going to see what they file in, now, what is that, 18 days or so. And before then, there could well be news. So there's definitely going to be news, right? We know Tuesday is GE. GE's either going to make me look really stupid and say, well, it's possible. I mean, they might have found, I don't know, Mohammed bin Salman to give him $200 billion or something, and everything's hunky-dory. Or some big investor might want to rescue him, I don't know. We have that, then we have the election a week later, and, maybe, who's that guy, Nate Silverman or something, Nate Silver?
Who is that?
He's the pollster who,
Oh, yeah.
who got Romney, Obama right, and may have gotten 14 right, but he got 16 hopelessly wrong. I think he said, I believe it was he who said the morning of the election that Trump had like a 2% chance of winning.
Right.
I may have that wrong. I may be confusing him with some other person, but his firm recently said, House gone.
Gone to
Democrats, yeah. So we'll have that election, and then that's the 6th, and then 9 days after that, by 9 days after that, Hansen, AICPA, Cohn-Resnick, Price Waterhouse, trustees, a lot of people have got to make some tough decisions here, and you've got to assume, as you make those tough decisions, remember, this is out of your hands. This is not an American problem alone. Other governments around the world might be watching this, all over the world. Other governments might have an interest in getting their money back. Other governments might look at the 50 private foundations that have donated to the Clinton Foundation when it wasn't a public charity, saying it was a public charity, saying, hey, you've got billions and billions of dollars. Why don't you give us our money back? Because you want to operate in, let's say, countries where we have influence. So I think this is finally playing out now at a moment where hopefully the white hats will triumph here over the dark hats. And thanks, Jason, for giving me a chance to try to explain this to an audience that we both really appreciate. And thank you to the audience for listening and helping us circulate this as much as possible. Let's hope we have some positive things to report very soon.
Now, one thing I want to point out, Charles, again, I don't know too much about the actual Dear Evan Hansen, but I didn't add this hashtag. I don't know what it's talking about. You will be found. So
yeah, there's I don't know much about the play either, the musical, but there's some question as to who was responsible for doing something, and somebody wrote on, "You Will Be Found" is a song in the musical, and
I see. So we're not talking about the person who is the cause of these frauds will be found. It's just
well, actually, we are talking about that for certain.
It's a happy irony.
Exactly.
Very good, very good. All right, Charles. Well, with that, I would say that that's it for today. Definitely want to thank our audience members and remind people, as you were pointing out, as all these social media platforms are being yanked out from under us and financed by huge corporations that probably want to crash the economy or don't care about people and certainly don't care about free speech. People should go over to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, sponsor the program. There's a growing number of shows that we're doing that are exclusive to Patreon, trying to do that to help build that up so that it can become a stronger platform for us. Thanks everybody for watching on there. I'm gonna have a very special presentation with Kevin Shipp tomorrow. Kevin has assembled a panel of whistleblowers, a round table. So I'm gonna keep that as a bit of a surprise, but people are going to wanna tune into that. So we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thanks for watching.